My top 3 consecutive times with DJI came in at 35.285. That's almost 1 full second faster than I had with Shark Byte. What's up, guys? Johnny here. Welcome back. Today I am super excited to bring you this one. Now personally, I love numbers. I love testing things out. I love comparing A versus B and having a way to look at 2 items and tell what's better, what's the best choice for me. I take that approach in my racing all the time. I compare my different times, my different laps, my different setups, and try to figure out the best thing possible. Now lately we've been seeing a lot of talk about latency figures in HD systems versus analog systems. We've seen some publications showing that DJI actually has lower latency numbers than Shark Byte. Numbers are great. Like I said, I'm a numbers guy, but I gotta tell you, when it comes to latency, there's really only one latency number I care about, and that's the amount of latency I have on the racetrack as I'm flying laps. So if that results in me flying slower, that's the latency I care about. We all like simple numbers to look at when we compare latency in cameras and digital FPV systems versus analog, etc. But unfortunately, there's always a lot of context that's missing from those discussions. You know, we don't really understand the mechanism that the camera uses, the VTX uses, the display uses, that we're using to compute those numbers. And what you end up with is sometimes we have global shutter cameras versus rolling shutter cameras, and those provide totally different results when it comes to the photodiode test, but yet blah blah blah. Anyway, I don't really care. That brings me to what I'm looking at today. I'm taking a look at Shark Byte versus DJI Digital FPV systems, and I'm putting it to the test on the racetrack. If you guys remember last year when I was testing out timing systems for DJI, specifically when I was testing out the rotor hazard timing system, I actually did a very similar test. I had a DJI Vista system, and I was comparing that to my analog quad. I raced them on the same course, I raced them back to back, and I compared those lap times. And when I did that, my lap times on DJI were awful. It was up to about a 2 second difference between DJI and analog in that day of testing. And I chalked that up to a lack of confidence I felt while flying that DJI quad that I did not have with analog. Now that was then. Now, what has changed this year? Well, first things first, this year I have a new quad to test. Now this quad right here is actually the 533 Switchback Pro HD. It's a purpose-built racing frame for the DJI FPV system. Now in the past when I did this test, I had a very large box frame, and I used that because there was so much room inside the box frame I could easily fit my DJI Vista unit inside of it. The problem with that is that box frame was very large and heavy already. Now you're adding those HD components inside it, you're making it even heavier, and it's also not the type of frame that I was used to running at the time, so it wasn't really a fair comparison with analog. Now that I actually have a purpose-built HD system, which is all in a nice, tight, high-quality racing frame, I can put this to the test and also compare it to Shark Byte that exists now and see, you know, can I actually get better results with DJI? How does it compare to Shark Byte? How does it compare to analog? And we're gonna get that and check it out. Now first, a little bit about me as a pilot. I am not the top tier racing pilots, but I do consider myself to be a pretty adequate, a reasonably fast pilot. But I do think that at my skill level, the results that I'm seeing with my ability to fly these HD systems, it should translate to the vast majority of racing pilots out there. Now, I'm not going to speak to, you know, the absolute top guys where we're looking at, you know, Neukel, who you can see has been flying Shark Byte lately. Propsicle's been flying Shark Byte lately. Heads Up, he's been flying Shark Byte lately as well. So you're going to see what those guys see and what they say. Maybe that's a little bit different, but I do think that my experience will apply to the vast majority of pilots, and that's why I really wanted to share it and bring it with to you guys. One thing to note though is because the DJI FPV system is quite large, there is some added weight you get with it. In addition to that, because you need a frame which actually has some additional room to fit the DJI components, you have additional weight inside that frame. When I weighed this frame all built up, minus the props, I was weighing in at about 319 grams on my scale. Now, for comparison, when I took the Shark Byte quad that I have, which is my standard Floss 3L racing frame, the exact same motors, but with the Shark Byte system, that came in at 271 grams. So that's almost a 50-gram difference between my Shark Byte quad and my DJI quad. For the purpose of this test, I figured that's okay. It's just a fact of the matter that if you're flying DJI, the Vista is going to be heavier. The camera's probably gonna be a little bit heavier. The frame to support is gonna be a little bit heavier. You're gonna have that added weight. So I figured it was reasonable to include that kind of difference and just race a standard Shark Byte quad versus standard DJI quad. Jumping straight into it, when we went to that race day, I felt that I already know what the results are of this test before we even do it. So therefore, I decided I wanted to fly the Shark Byte system first. So the plan for this test was set up at the start of a day on a track. I'm going to fly that track 1 hour with Shark Byte, race that quad for 1 hour straight. At the end of that 1 hour, capture my fastest time, my fastest 3 consecutive times. Then switch over to the DJI system, fly that quad on the same exact track for 1 hour. At the end of that 1 hour, capture my top 3 consecutive times, capture my fastest lap time, compare that to Shark Byte, and then use that to determine, was there a latency difference? Did I feel less confident with DJI, matching my prior expectations based on my results with my analog versus DJI quad? Right now, I'm starting with Shark Byte first. I'm flying Shark Byte because to be perfectly honest, expect a significantly better performance result out of Shark Byte. I expect it to be lower latency system. I expect it to perform better. I expect to have better confidence based on my prior experience flying these things. Therefore, combined with the fact that the weight of my Shark Byte quad is significantly less, I figured it didn't need any more advantages. Fly it first while I'm cold on the track. It should have the best times anyway. It doesn't need any more advantages. Now, fast forward. Flying the track with Shark Byte. First off, I really love the Shark Byte system. I don't think it truly translates as you're watching the DVR, but it is a significant upgrade over the analog system. In this particular Shark Byte quad, I am flying the Foxeer Digisight V1 camera. It's clearly not the best performing camera possible on the Shark Byte system, but it does still provide a very nice image. One thing that I personally don't like about the Shark Byte system is the cameras are all 16:9, and the vertical field of view is just significantly lacking in the current Runcam and Foxeer nano size cameras. In order to compensate for that, I ended up increasing my camera angle on my Shark Byte quad so that it's looking up higher than usual. And I did notice that while flying, it did take a little bit of getting used to. I wasn't turning and flying quite the way I'm used to with that analog quad, so it took a little bit of getting used to. And even then, if you notice, when I'm doing the ladder operations, if I'm going from bottom to top, it's hard to see the top of the gate. I can't quite tell where the opening is, and I really struggled with that movement while flying Shark Byte. And I think it all comes down to the fact that the Shark Byte system does not have proper vertical field of view. While I'm flying the Shark Byte system, I'm flying it in what's known as a 4:3 scalar view. I'm using my HDO goggles, which are 4:3 only goggles. Now, there's two different ways to fly 4:3 when you're flying Shark Byte. You can either do 4:3 scalar or 4:3 cut. In 4:3 scalar, it cuts off the top and bottom of your display, so you're seeing a proper 16:9 image in the middle of your HDO 4:3 displays. If you're flying 4:3 cut, it chops off the right and left side and fills up your display. But what I find is that when using 4:3 cut, the field of view is cut down so much, it gets to be very hard to fly on the racetrack with Shark Byte. So therefore, I prefer the 4:3 scalar mode. That's what I'm using for all the flying here. Now, I can tell you that overall, flying the Shark Byte quad on this track feels really good. I'm happy with the lap times that I am putting in on this track. It feels like I am pretty fast. I'm flying relatively consistent. I'm not really crashing much. It's overall a very good experience. This really feels like a step up in the HD journey to racing quads. Now, at the end of my 1 hour, I recorded a fastest top 3 consecutive time of 36.247 and a fastest single lap of 11.621. Both seem like pretty good times. Now let's move on to the DJI quad. Now for DJI, I'm running the DJI Vista system. So it is a Caddx Vista VTX combined with a standard DJI FPV camera. That camera provides a 120 frames per second low latency mode, which is what I'm using for all of this testing. In addition to being low latency 120 frames per second, the standard camera is also a 4:3 sensor, and it provides additional vertical field of view over what I'm seeing with Shark Byte. And as soon as I started flying with DJI, I felt extremely comfortable that I was able to lower that camera angle back down to what I'm used to and still feel comfortable with what I'm seeing top to bottom. Having that familiar 4:3 sensor, that familiar 4:3 view was really helpful for me personally, and immediately I felt comfortable flying DJI on the track. Personally, I noticed, we talked about when I was flying Shark Byte, doing the ladder, going from bottom to top. When I'm flying with DJI, I didn't notice any issue. I felt like I could see the gate just that much better, where I had more confidence going through that particular obstacle. Most of the track felt the same between the two of them, but those things where I'm going low to high, having that 4x3 screen really helped me with DJI. I had just finished flying Shark Byte. I am pushing myself hard on DJI. I am doing everything I can to try to beat my Shark Byte times on DJI. And what I'm noticing is I am flying very consistent with DJI. I am not feeling that difference in latency where it feels like I don't have confidence. In fact, I have lots of confidence. I feel that overall, I'm able to fly the lines that I want to be flying. I'm keeping my turns relatively tight. I'm keeping my corkscrew relatively tight. I'm keeping my ladders relatively tight. And it feels like I'm flying good, consistent laps. Now, at the end of the hour, I had a ton of fun flying DJI. In fact, I would say this experience flying DJI on the track was probably the most fun I have ever had with DJI flying on a track. So to me, that says something huge about the 533 Switchback Pro HD, that providing that compact package that everything fits in and works well together, it really does take that DJI experience on a track to the next level for me personally. So I had a blast with that. Now, if we go back and take a look at comparing the times between Shark Byte and DJI, I was in for a shock. My top 3 consecutive times with DJI came in at 35.285. That's almost 1 full second faster than I had with Shark Byte. In fact, my fastest lap while flying DJI was 11.316. Now, a lot of you have heard about issues perhaps with timing in DJI. Maybe there's an issue with timing here. For all timing of DJI, I actually flew the rotor hazard, I used the rotor hazard timing system. If you go check back my previous video from last year, I tested the rotor hazard system with DJI and I verified the accuracy is extremely high. So I had full confidence flying my laps with DJI and timing them with rotor hazard, knowing that I'd get accurate results for my comparison here. Now, if we pull up the comparison chart and we take a look at what our laps look like when I'm flying Shark Byte versus when I'm flying DJI, keeping in mind the fact that I flew Shark Byte first and then after I was already warmed up flew DJI, you can see that overall the average laps are pretty much the same. On average, my laps on DJI were 13.21. My average lap for Shark Byte, 13.28. Basically the same. The top 25% of laps, when I flew them on DJI, 12.30. When I flew them on Shark Byte, it was 12.30, exactly the same value. Now, on DJI, the top 75%, that was 13.45 versus 13.93 for Shark Byte. And I mentioned I had a little bit of trouble with that field of view. I felt like I was missing a little bit of consistency with Shark Byte. I think that shows up in that 75% number. And when you look at these graphs here, you can kind of see that things are more condensed on the DJI side than they are in Shark Byte. That speaks to that consistency, even though overall the performance was pretty much the same between the two of them. But again, you cannot deny the fact that I was able to fly 1 second faster for 3 consecutive laps with DJI. That was not a result I was expecting, and that result honestly completely blew me away. I really expected that DJI was going to show that I could not be confident on the track. I'd be significantly slower. And that's why I love testing things so much, because sometimes you get a massive surprise. And that's what I got today. But again, I do think it's worth noting that DJI had the advantage in this test of going second, of being warmed up and more familiar, not having that 4:3 aspect ratio. And additionally, I was flying the Vista camera, or the DJI standard OG camera with low latency mode, which you cannot buy anymore. So that's not, if you go out and buy a brand new system, your results may not match exactly what I had, but I was using the best system that I had available for me to test. Now, given that I had seen these results, given that I had my fastest result with DJI, I started to wonder, perhaps the issue is not as much DJI versus Shark Byte, but maybe I'm flying slow with both of them and don't even realize it. So I decided to break out one of my analog quads and run a 3rd hour of racing on my analog drone to compare those times to DJI. Going right into flying analog, going from that super crisp, sharp DJI view into analog took a little bit of adjusting to get used to. I did enjoy the added field of view. It definitely allows you to see things better. It's what I'm used to seeing. But that lack of detail, when you get so used to that big giant picture in your face, you go back to those small goggles, the HDO goggles, and that rough looking picture, it takes a little bit of time to get used to. So it took a few batteries before I felt comfortable with analog again, and then I was able to start flying and really feel like I was flying well on the track. it was immediately clear that my analog quad was the fastest quad on the day. It is the lightest drone that I have. It doesn't have the added weight of, the larger VTX or Shark Byte. It also has the heads-up motors in it versus my other two drones that I was testing both have Talon motors in them. The Talon 1860 kV motors are absolutely fantastic motors, and I wanted my two primary test quads to have the exact same performance characteristics. But my analog quads are currently rocking the heads-up FPV motors, and those are just a little bit faster than the Talons, noticeably faster, I would say. So flying the course, as I'm going, if you take a look, going through the quick hairpins, it was definitely the most responsive quad that I had today flying my analog quad. Overall, it felt absolutely fantastic flying, but what I was noticing while flying is the timing system wasn't saying lap times that were faster than what I was getting with DJI. At the end of the hour, I felt that flying analog was good, but it showed me the light that I was not flying worse with Shark Byte or DJI to the point where there's some latency involved that's preventing me to fly at the top of my ability with those HD systems. Taking a look at the comparison chart with analog versus Shark Byte versus DJI, you can now see that my times are more compact in analog. That's the setup I'm most used to. That's probably the fastest setup that I have. My average lap is 12.78. That is faster than I had with both Shark Byte and DJI. Looking at Shark Byte and DJI, my average times are 13.21 and 13.28. So on average, I'm faster on analog. The top 25%, 12.18 on analog versus 12.3 on the other two systems. And the big difference is the top 75%. I have a 13.05 in analog versus 13.45 and 13.93 for Shark Byte and DJI respectively. So overall, my average laps were actually faster with analog. But if you take a look at the things that I was measuring today, top 3 consecutive results for analog, 35.697. That's 0.4 seconds slower than DJI. Even though analog had the advantage of going last when I was warmed up, I still set my fastest time with DJI. That's the absolute last thing I ever expected to see on this particular test. In addition to that, my fastest lap on the day when I flew DJI was an 11.3. My fastest on analog was 11.4. My fastest lap was also DJI on the day. A 0.1 second difference is not a huge difference, but still, for DJI at my level to be faster on a track after an hour of flying versus analog, that really says something to me about the state of the fundamental DJI system, at least if you can combine it with that stock DJI/Vista camera, which offers a proper low latency mode. All right, so in conclusion, what does that tell us? Well, first things first, what I can say is that we live in exciting times for drone racing. We are having these emerging HD technologies, and they are showing that they can actually be quite competitive on the drone racing field at this point when they're combined with the proper other technologies. For all these tests, I am flying the Ghost Pure Race system, 300 Hertz mode. Comparing that to when I had my test last year, when I compared my box frame DJI quad versus my standard analog quads, I was flying Crossfire back then. Now, I don't know if that's why I saw such different results this year versus last year. It could be that because the control link is now so fast and so low latency, that 3 millisecond difference actually makes it so the total combined latency is low enough to be competitive with DJI. That may be what's happening. Or maybe it is just that the lower weight of the compact one system. Maybe it's the more solid frame that I'm flying now. Maybe it's all the above. I don't exactly know why my results were so different this year, but I'm definitely excited by the fact that they were, and it's really showing that we can be competitive enjoying DJI racing on the track. I do want to mention again that I am flying a camera in DJI which you cannot buy. As I understand it, this camera has been discontinued. To me, it's the holy grail of HD cameras. I think if this camera was available on Shark Byte, for example, it would be the best possible option for Shark Byte as well. I really hope that somehow this is related to our current pandemic chip shortage situation, and maybe as things start to stabilize a little more, that camera can come back to us, because I'm really going to miss if it's gone. Now, keep in mind, if you have to run something different like a Runcam MIPI camera, maybe, or a Caddx Polar camera, maybe your results will be different as those will be higher latency cameras. I can't really speak to that. I can speak with the DJI Vista camera that I ran, and that gave me a great experience. Where do we go from here? Well, I can tell you that I'm not done with the Shark Byte system. I absolutely love the Shark Byte system. It integrates with racing absolutely seamlessly. It works great with our existing timing systems, very easy to integrate with our DVR systems. It's overall a great racing platform. But I do need it to get better for that racing. I do need better field of view. One thing I'm looking forward to testing is I actually have a run cam or an HD0 micro camera on the way for me to test. So I'm going to be able to run that micro camera inside of my Shark Byte quad and see how that compares on the track compared to flying my DigiSight system. Like I said, the DigiSight's a good camera, but we all know it could be that much better. You know, perhaps using that micro-sized sensor, the better image quality that's promised with it, maybe that will give me additional confidence on the track, and that'll help me perform even better. I look forward to checking that out. And overall, I'm just really excited and happy about the state of HD technology and where we're headed in drone racing. I can't wait to try out more of these builds, try out more of these settings, maybe try out flying Shark Byte at some of these local races and see how I do compared to average or to everyone else flying analog quads. I think we're in for exciting times, and I plan to bring those to you guys, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Again, I was flying the DJI system inside of the 533 Switchback Pro HD. If you are interested in picking up one of these because you want to fly a well-built, organized, all-in-one solution for DJI, they actually have pre-orders up for sale now at 533. I'll have a link down below if you want to check that out. It is not an affiliate link, but I just want to offer that for anyone who's interested in it. They should be shipping those out in the next few weeks, so definitely go and check that if you're interested in it. And yeah, I hope you found this helpful. I can't wait to hear what you guys are doing that are flying HD and what your thoughts are. And, you know, if you're not flying Shark Byte or DJI now, maybe your plans are for next year. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, I'll catch y'all later. Peace!